the last podcast of a year that everybody will be eager to forget. But hopefully you haven't forgotten us, your hosts for the How Long to Beat podcast. It's Rick, Alex, and Paula here as always. And before we get straight into the games we've beaten, played, and retired, we've got a few quick announcements. So take it away, Alex.
Yeah, so on the How Long to Beat forums, there's a gaming challenge that's been set up for 2021. So if people want to check that out, a few of us, we're going to, let's just say, loosely participate in this challenge. I'm not very good at keeping, doing these challenges, but it looks really fun.
This is our plausible deniability when we do badly.
Yeah, exactly, right? This is when at the end of the year, it's like, well, I got 5 from the 50-some. But it's a cool list, and it has some interesting ideas, so you can check that out. Another thing is the Fantasy Critic League. And so this is a neat little thing. Signups are going to be going until the end of 2020, which, if you're listening to this, means today. This is releasing on New Year's Eve, so if you didn't listen to this the day it released, well, look at you. You missed out. So yeah, you have until the end of today to sign up, and the draft is going to take place at the beginning of 2021. So you're going to need to be available to make some picks, and there's tons of information about this on the How Long to Beat forum thread. You'll find it as Fantasy Critic League and in the Discord channel. But we also have the reigning champ of 2019's Fantasy Critic League here. Paul, you want to tell us a little bit about this Critic League?
So the Fantasy Critic League is very much like you choose a list of games, and depending on the score of that game, you gain points, you lose points, and stuff like that. At the middle of the year, you can actually pick some other games that have been announced during the year. And it's actually pretty fun because you have to compete and try to grab those games that you think are going to get the most points. To be honest, I'm kind of surprised that I won because after Animal Crossing New Horizons got released, I kind of vanished from the league for a couple of months. And then I came back and I was like, oh my God, I have a stupid amount of points.
That's how you did it. You played the long game, right? You just waited it out and won it all.
Because after the second round of picks was pretty much over, I was like, okay, let's see what other games are going to get released. Oh, it's Age of Calamity. Oh, it's Crash Bandicoot 4. Oh, there's this other game. Even if you get a good lead at the start, you can still get surpassed by the other competitors if you don't do the second pick.
That's a good point. Well, sick. I know. I think we're all going to be competing in it this year, which should be pretty fun. So hopefully we'll see some other folks from the forums in on that. Should we jump in? Oh yeah, Rick, do you add?
I was just going to say, just before we go, if this is dropping on New Year's Eve as we're planning, sign-ins end tonight if you're listening on release. So don't delay sign up literally today. But yeah, so let's get straight into it. If you want, I'll go first into what we've beaten because I've got the one that I think is probably going to prompt the most debate.
Oh no!
So yeah, I am the minority viewpoint, certainly of the three of us here, in thinking Florence, which Alex reviewed and gave glowing praise last week, is pretty shit actually. My stance is even hardened versus when I actually first finished it. I'm just going to come straight out. It's not a game. It's an interactive comic, which is fine. That's allowed and it's okay. But you lose nothing from watching a playthrough of that game. It's half an hour of okay graphics with a non-existent story.
Well, I don't know if it's a non-existent story.
Yeah,
it might as well be. It's a few vignettes that sort of touch on feelings. There's no narrative, not really.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I can...
That's hyperbolic, actually. I'll walk that one back. There is narrative, but you only just about get sort of the odd bit of it because there's no meat to the pie. You just sort of get the lightest hint of flavor at the top edge of things. And I get what they were going for with the no dialogue situation. They sort of wanted that same emotional hit that you get from the first 10 minutes of Up, but it's not Up. It's just not.
Yeah, I mean,
and
I don't think I'm as hard on it just because I don't think it's not trying to be some kind of life-changing thing. It's just sort of portraying a pretty typical emotional experience that many people will go through. And so I think in that sense I was just sort of fine because I'm like, oh yeah, it's just a nice sort of sweet look at relationships. I mean, spoilers. You know what? if you care about spoilers for Florence, which is like a 30-minute game, then
And you shouldn't,
go
by
away.
the way, but if you do.
It's a romance, right? Like, it's essentially a young woman who's kind of, fallen into the rut of life in her 20s, I believe, which is, which I related to intensely. And then, like, it's kind of that rut, and then, like, finding sort of that passion in life, seeing how that sort of deteriorates, and then, allowing her to sort of discover things about herself and, like, some things that she enjoys, and kind of, like, blossoming through that, and sort of letting go of, like, past experiences, which I don't know. I just thought, I was like, it's just kind of sweet. I kind of liked that look at life, and how, like, people who come in and out influence you in certain ways. And, when they leave, sometimes what you have to do is just let them go. And then you but you still take things on from them. Right. So, like, even when she lets go of this relationship, she, like, takes with her that, like, reigniting of her sort of artistic passion. The one critique I might have is that, like, no way in hell she becomes a successful artist. That just doesn't happen. Speaking from the artist, I always sort of laugh.
In you rather than
the
cynic in me
is like, oh, maybe she takes up a nice hobby, but I'm like, oh, she became a successful painter. All right, like, but it does happen. It does happen. That's the cynic part.
But,
yeah.
Yeah, and credit where it's due. What little gameplay there is, and my problem is that it don't need to interact with it. It's just not. You could watch the thing that we talked about with the speech bubbles and get the same thing. You don't need to be clicking it. You could watch the thing that's going on with the numbers. You don't lose anything from clicking it. That stuff was clever, but I just don't think it was sufficient to carry it.
That's
because the overall narrative I got, I didn't feel I was given any reason to care about either of the characters. I couldn't muster any kind of emotional connection for them whatsoever. The experience just fell flat for me from every perspective. But I think the single biggest thing is just that I'm a game player's king kind of guy. And, not to the point that our VNs aren't a game, because you're making interactive choices that do affect the way things go. And I distinguish those from kinetic novels, but it's just what's there isn't enough for me personally.
Yeah.
And I think I gave it a 5, but I can see myself going back and dropping that to a 4. I just really didn't click with it even slightly.
That's funny. Yeah,
which is a shame. But go on.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, like, but that's fair. Like, I mean, I get it. I can see where those, like, complaints come from. I just found, like, because, like, I sort of see what you say, like, where you could watch it, but I will say that I felt more engaged. For instance, when they move in together, you have to, like, take down some of her stuff and put up, like, his, and that I
mean,
enjoyed.
It's adorable.
Let me stop you though, because 10 minutes later when he moves back out, it's not the stuff that you put.
Yeah, of course not, because
it's a whole different setup.
Yeah, it's been years.
Yeah, I don't care. I don't feel like my decision had any impact whatsoever. Why the fuck am I invested?
Yeah, but I don't know.
Because if that had been the same stuff in the same place, it would have been like, oh! And I get what you're saying, where, well, yeah, they have their own lives. Like they would have moved things around. I get that. But that it just didn't resonate.
That's fair. I mean, maybe that would have been more effective if it was still, like, when you put it there. Like, that's fair. But Paula, sorry, you're going to say something.
Oh, yeah. In my case, I can resonate with pretty much any kind of storytelling. The thing I like about Florence, like, in the gameplay department, is that at the beginning, the little interactions feel like a little bit like work. Because, like, you have to move the brush to brush your teeth, you have to do the work, and it shows, like, the routine. And I feel like the fact that there's, like, this kind of gameplay segment that feels like work is because it's how it's trying to show you things from the side from the protagonist. Because, like, as someone has dealt with mental health issues myself, when you're not good with your life, everything feels like you have to put extra effort on it to make it happen. But after the protagonist meets this guy and everything seems to be like, okay, everything, like, does itself pretty much.
And I get what they were going for. It just is that ultimately for me it didn't, no pun intended, work.
It's fair. Not every game is for everyone.
And to put a nice, neat bow on it, I'm glad that I played it nevertheless, because that will give me an appreciation then for games that do resonate and do good things, because I will have the sort of look how much better it is than Florence sort of thing. That turned into a backhander. It wasn't supposed to be. But
Actually, I have a comment later on this makes me appreciate better things now, but it's for later.
Foreshadowing.
We'll wait. But yeah, I mean, the one thing I'll say too is like, it is a bit of an experiment as a game, right? Like it is very much sort of experimental. So it makes sense to me that there can be these diametrically kind of opposed takes on it, right? Because I think it's like this is very much a game where if it works, you're like, this is awesome. And I can see how if it doesn't, this would just be like, why the fuck did I just spend 40 minutes on this? You know what I mean? Like
that's half an hour of my life that I can't get back. That's exactly where I was.
Yeah, I could see that. All right, cool. What was did you beat anything else this week?
Kind of. I did another run of Monster Prom with friends of the podcast, Uwe and Dragon. Still didn't get a prom date, so third time's the charm. But had a good time nevertheless. It's still a really well-written game. And if you have friends that also have the game, you should absolutely give it a whirl. But yeah, that's all the stuff that... Sorry?
I said you'll get that prom date one day.
Yeah, it's probably be like fifth or sixth time as it goes. I keep doing so well and then right at the end just blow it with the stat rolls and everything else. But it is what it is. It's games, none of it really matters. Let's move on quickly. What have you played and beaten this week, Alex?
Yeah, so
beaten,
I beat Night in the Woods. This is the game of the month. It's the end of the month. I had retired it a long time ago, and I, for the life of me, cannot remember why, but I did. And going back to it, I really enjoyed it. I do have some problems with it in terms of like some of the gameplay stuff. Now, I have seen some good comments on the gameplay, the trippy moments that Paula talked about. So I'm gonna try to not be too spoilery because I know, Rick, you're gonna take this on in the future here. So I'm gonna talk slightly generally about this. What I will say is that I have my little notebook, so I'm following Paula's wisdom now and taking notes on the games that I play so that I can remember everything. Yeah, so the trippy bits in the game, I recognize their purpose in the game. It has a solid connection to the story of the game. I still hate it. I just hate it. Like even when I'm like, I know why I'm in these moments, I still don't want to be doing this. I recognize that this is an important connection to the story of the game, but I still don't want to be doing this. And I'm just like, I'll put it this way. There are sections in the game where you have to find musicians. And anyone who's played it knows what I'm talking about. And I just... Why? Like, I just hate it so much. It felt like it was like... And you know why I think I hated it? Because everything else was so compelling around it. I was like, stop. I just want to go talk to May's friends. Just let me go talk to her friends and learn more about the story. I don't want to do this part. Which is a testament to the game's writing. I grew up, which I think I've talked about a little bit on this, in like a very small town in Canada. And... Our whole province is basically like an industry province in the sense of like, there's the fisheries, there's like paper mills, like it's a bunch of factories and stuff. And a lot of those factories have just been shut down, right? Like, and fishing is just kind of gone, like it's still a thing, obviously, but it's owned by big corporations and like the fishermen make an okay living, but it's still pretty dangerous. And it's on the
shadow of its former self kind of thing.
Exactly. So like all of the unionization themes in this and like the whole fact that this is basically a mining town that has like, and also it just has this one train track that runs through it. And like that is exactly what my town is. My town is a one train track town where like the train track just cuts through it. You hear the train every day. Like that is the town it is, It's like it was the town along the train track, that had the workers there, but now there's no work. So what do you do in the town? Why do you even live there? Unless you're going to work in the city or something. So that resonated a lot with me, like that like feeling trapped in a town sentiment. I also found that like it had a really beautiful sort of like learning to communicate seemed to be like a big theme, at least in my playthrough. So if you go to the forum and the game of the month, I got the same ending as Nalb. I don't know if it's a silent K or not. I got the same ending as they did. So for people listening, if you want to know like what ending did Alex get, that's the one. And I really liked it. I thought it was great. And
so there are multiple endings. I thought it was like a
There's
A singular.
I thought that there were like multiple routes, but one ending.
I
Am I
think
wrong?
so. Well, here's the thing. I think there's one like main like ending. I think some of the discussion and some of the like dialogue can be a little different. I think the main yeah. So like plot wise,
Is it kind of like
the same?
Is it kind of like The Walking Dead season 1 then, where it's almost like a 2D muscle where it bulges out in the middle but comes to the same endpoint?
Yes,
more or less.
I think so.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Because basically there are gameplay segments that you can do that will sacrifice other things, right? So like you can hang out with certain people and you won't be able to see the other person's thing. So I spent a lot of time with Bia. I didn't spend a ton of time with Greg. I did spend some time, and I spent some time with Angus. My recommendation is there's a moment where you're allowed to hang out with Angus in this game, Rick, and I say do it because it's a really touching moment in there.
What, one specific moment?
Yeah, it'll be really obvious though. It's telegraphed. I just think it's really great.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyway,
Did you see the stars?
Sorry, what was that?
Did
stars.
you see the stars?
Yes, that's the moment I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, but the other, like the teacher with the teacher.
Oh, with which one?
With the teacher in the roof.
On the roof. No, I don't think I did that one. I don't think. Well, if I did, it might have been when I played it the first time. Where about in the game is it? Is it in the third chapter?
No, you can do it like I think from the second one. It's every other day.
No, I didn't get that.
You have like a little event.
Didn't get that.
There you go.
There's a ton of little events that you can miss in this. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff. But anyway, yeah, there's also an element to this game that I'm not going to talk about right now, but the ending might like conflict with leave people conflicted a bit. I was at first like, what? But then I quite enjoyed it, and I think it really ties everything together. So yeah, I think this is an imperfect game that's extremely worth experiencing. Like it really, it just hits on some very, very real, serious like life stuff, and just in a good way. That might be my warning, actually. If you have any kind of like, if you're in like a fragile place, yeah, Paula.
Yeah, if you're like in a super fragile place, you may want to skip this game from now because it touches on some very heavy subject that, well, depending on which fragile place you are, it will either make you more fragile or maybe like give you a little nudge. And that's what I think.
I actually wasn't planning to tell you this game at all, and I my curiosity had definitely been piqued by some of the discussion around it, which is sort of what you want from a good game of a month. You want people to be interested by what comes out of it after the fact. Probably still wasn't interested enough to buy it, but then Epic went and gave it away for free, and that's a price that I could sort of stretch to.
Right?
Yeah,
I will warn you, it's a little Florency. There's not a ton of
not too much though.
Yeah.
Listen, if you've actually got to do things and make decisions, I can fuck with that.
Okay.
And it looks like it's actually more of a game, and I do like stories and games. It's just the gameplay is king thing. It won't be until after Cyberpunk, so it's not going to be this side of the new year. But in the next sort of 4 to 6 weeks, I'm aiming to pick it up. So once I finish Blasphemous, which we'll get to later, I've got a few sort of short but kind of big file size games on my PC that I want to sort of smash out, clear up some SSD space. And once I've done that, one of the games that will then occupy that freed up space is going to be Night in the Woods.
Nice. Yeah, I guess I should say it's not really like Florence, but just in the sense that it is far more about the story.
Yeah.
Go on, backpedal.
But there's like gameplay sections, like the trippy stuff that I actually thought it was a little bit creepy, and I was like, something's gonna jump at me. But there's like other optional little stuff that you can do that will satiate your hunger for gaming, for gameplay.
Gaming itch, is that what you mean?
Yeah. There's an optional game on your computer that you can play that's just straight up like a roguelite, and it's great.
And there's
I think I've seen screenshots of that actually. Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
There you go.
Anyway,
keep your eyes and ears peeled.
Yeah, that's Night in the Woods. Highly recommend it. go play it. The other game that I played 2 other games this week, is actually our How Long to Beat the Game of last week, which is Alien Storm.
Of course it is. Yes. It's good.
It is good. Yeah, it's good. I played it on my Retroid Pocket 2. I played the arcade version, which I do recommend. It's gorgeous. It has like those, it looks like the creatures from like The Thing, like John Carpenter-esque, like aliens, and they're like exploding out of people and you have to like shoot them. It's really neat because it's a beat 'em up. So like, you know, it's a side scroller, like beat 'em up, but then it'll like morph into a first person sort of shooter where you're like shooting, like gallery shooter. And then it'll turn into like a running shooter. So you're just like auto running and like you have to like move and like shoot stuff. And it does that in sort of each level. It like changes like that, which is really cool. What I will say is hard as balls. It clearly was a quarter gobbler because like, holy crap, it's really fun to play emulated because you could just like press the select button to like load as infinite coins, and then every time you die you just press start and you just keep going. So like I had no problem, you know. I probably died like so many times, but I beat it in like 40 minutes or something like that.
Honestly, you call yourself a gamer. Ugh.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna spend my time trying to beat that thing. I'm curious if it's more difficult or less on the Sega Genesis. They might have adjusted it a little bit. In the arcade, honestly, in some of those like shooter segments, I was like, oh my god, I can't move my reticle fast enough to freaking kill the things that are coming at me. I assume it would have been better with a joystick in the arcade. It's probably faster. But I can just imagine, like, if anyone played this in the arcades, I would love to know how many quarters you have to sink into this damn thing just to get past the first friggin' stage. Because, like, holy crap. But yeah, if you have like if you're emulating or whatever, really worth picking it up and playing it for just like an hour and just have some fun. It's a good time.
Yeah, I'm making a note. Because I made a note last week and then promptly lost the sticky note. So I'm making a virtual note this time.
This is what's nice about our How Long to Beat the Games segment, because we can just get some new games. And the last one I'll go through kind of quick here. I beat Knights of the Old Republic 2, the Sith Lords. Everyone always says shit like this is an unfinished game, and I feel like that's so unfair to Obsidian because it's not unfinished. It's like maybe rushed, maybe. I will give that. Like the ending of the game certainly feels a little bit like they're like, we don't have time for you to go do fucking side quest shit. You're going to go from 1-1-1-1 until you get to the end, which honestly, I'm okay with that. Like I was sort of like, yeah, I want to get to the end now. I played the game. And from what I understand from the restored content mod, a lot of it is dialogue. The ending is not going to be different. It is still the ending of the game, right? If there was anything Obsidian wanted to add to this game, it's gone. You know what I'm saying? So like, I'm just kind of like, it's fine as it is. In fact, it was so enjoyable. There were no bugs in my playthrough. It worked perfectly. One time the loading screen just didn't load near the very end and I just had to restart, but that was it. And that shit happens in modern games more often than not. So, Rick's like raising eyebrows. We're talking about Cyberpunk later, so it's like,
GDPR noises. Yeah, that's exactly where my head was.
Yeah, so I don't know. If you're worried about playing this game because you've heard like, oh, it's unfinished or oh, there's stuff lost, please don't. Please play it. It is such a phenomenal game. It really deals with the fact that the Jedi and the Sith are both assholes. And it's like, for like everyone who lives in the galaxy, they're just like, why are these people fighting and murdering us all the time? Like, it's so excellent, right? Like it deals with the reality that like the concept of cutting oneself off from like emotions is like a terrible idea, which I've always thought is true. And I'm like, the Jedi have this horrible concept. And so like the game really deals with the grays. And so in fact, like you can get, a gray Jedi robe in the game, and it's really trying to hint at you where it's like, hey, we're trying to like push you towards understanding the middle path in this. And they succeed in some ways. Unfortunately, at the time, choices couldn't be so nuanced. Oftentimes, it's pretty obvious that like this is the good and this is the bad. And even me playing as someone who wasn't trying to be like, oh Jedi, you just get light side points for just doing the right thing, which borderline isn't even that generous. It's just like kind of nice. So it's a shame they couldn't do a like third game in this because the ending really beautifully sets up for like another game. Not in the sense where it feels unsatisfying. Like you do feel like your story comes to an end, but it really just hints at this like Revan from the first game is still out there, and like anyway, I'm not gonna say what you end up doing, but yeah. Anyway, I love this game. This game's awesome. It was like a warm hug. It was just fun. It's a good time. It works beautifully on the Series X. If you haven't played either of these games, they're both like $10. They often go on sale for like $5. Pick them up on your Xbox. Play them. Have a good time. And that's all I got to say on that. What have you been playing, Paula?
So I finished a couple of games. One of them was something I thought I would end up like finishing like in early 2021, and it is Tsukihime or Moon Princess. And this one was a visual novel that a friend of mine has been like recommending me. He even installed it himself on my PC. And like, I am sorry for my friend, but it didn't live up to expectations. And I actually investigated a little bit in the game because considering how the game was released, it is impressive for that time to an extent. But by today's standards, the story holds up, but the rest of the game falls way behind. So, Tsukihime in particular is an adult doujin visual novel created by Typhoon. It is a doujin because it was made like more as a hobby. Like, you know how people sometimes like make comics or games or whatever, and they sell them like at anime expos. Tsukihime was a game a little bit like that, and that like it was made by one author and one illustrator, and it got like several trial versions before the final release. And the first preview was like comic at 56 in 1999, and like a certain amount of copies were distributed, and the next year or later that year another amount of copies were distributed, and then like even the initial release wasn't like the complete game, which is kind of weird.
So they were a little bit ahead of their time then.
Yeah, but oh my god, it kind of makes sense.
Boo!
Sick burn.
Oh my god, really? Sorry, go on.
Now you have to keep going, Paul. Yeah, it's just like, I have to fall.
I have to pause a little bit.
Oh dear.
Damn it, Rick. But yeah, like it was distributed like in such a weird way. Even the final release was like they released like a floppy disk with all the content of the game later, like in 2001, 2002. Maybe I'm wrong with that. So take this with a grain of salt. But it shows in the sense that in the first couple of trials, not all the cast was like finished. And it shows in a way that when you go through the main game, you can only have like one of two character routes first, and the others unlocked as you complete the other characters' routes. But what happens is that there is like very little interaction between the characters themselves, which I guess, okay, it is technically, well, it is an eroge, which in my opinion it shouldn't be because it takes away more than it adds to it.
Sorry, I had to interrupt you for 1 second because I am a sad little boy who doesn't know a lot of these terms. What is a doujin first? A
doujin usually refers either like a comic, manga, little project that you do like as a hobby and are usually like distributed or sold during like events.
Cool. Okay. So it's like an independent sort of hobby thing. Cool.
Like the game version of the zine.
It's kind of like an indie, but not quite there.
Yes, but not like an independent. It's just like a like individual or like hobbyists kind of putting it together, right? That's what. Cool. Okay.
Yeah, very much. Any other term that I have to explain, actually?
Eroge.
Okay,
It's a
an
dirty,
eroge
dirty game.
is
that's what
a
it means.
game with sexual content.
Oh, okay.
And explicit.
Gotcha. Okay.
So what I'm saying is Tsukihime shouldn't be an eroge because to put it like lightly, like it isn't, those scenes aren't like neither well written nor add anything.
Gotcha.
Oh dear.
And it takes you from the experience, from the story. It's not like in other visual novels that you have like little romance sections that it kind of motivates the protagonist and stuff like that, or I don't know, are like nice. These scenes are nice.
They're clearly there for one reason and one reason only, basically, huh?
Very much, but if you get a hold of the what's its name? The fan-made translation, the fan translation of the game, you might be able to skip those scenes. There's an option on it. I didn't find it. If you can find it, good for you. Pat yourself in the back, and you're gonna enjoy a beautiful game.
Nice.
So yeah, like since it released in parts, there's not much interaction between the other actors, and since it was like independently made, and you can see how like the female characters has like a lot of love put into the design, the coloring, and the shading and everything. The other characters, the male characters, don't get the same amount of love, even if they're like the cool bad guy or the supposedly the best friend, which I don't know what kind of friend he is. I don't need enemies with that guy here. And pretty much like stuff like that. The protagonist, surprisingly, wasn't like a blank slate. He has kind of like his own personality, which was pretty nice because there's a lot of like indie games that have like a blank slate as a character that has less personality than a rice cracker.
Yeah, and you're supposed to.
And I'm happy to say that Chiki does have some kind of personality, even if it shows more like a little bit later on the game. And the one thing that really put me off was the format of the text, because you usually have like these text boxes with the character name on it and very pretty. And I'm used to playing like well-made visual novels in the sense that the UI is pretty. So the bar was a little bit high on that one. But here's like, okay, you have your square, you have an image, either like the background with your character or whatever, and you have like words all over the screen.
Okay.
Which can get kind of confusing if you don't pick up like the quirks from each character as they speak, which took me a solid 2 hours to get. What else? The story itself was actually pretty good. Like, and I think that at the time having like multiple endings per route was kind of visionary of sorts, or wasn't like as common as it is today. So I have to give props to the game for that. The actual plot of the game, you play as Chiki, who is like, I'm gonna say, a high school student that used to live at a mansion, but after an accident, he started seeing like these cracks on reality, and he had this feeling that at any time the world would collapse. And the only reason he hasn't gone crazy yet is because this other character gave him a pair of glasses that allows him to see the world without the cracks. And he kind of sees the depth of things. And that is kind of like a very interesting point in the game. And then you have this case of a serial killer on town.
Oh, this sounds like there's just way too much going on. Can I ask a question? Like, this seems to me a little bit like a case of you had to be there ism, where it sounds kind of like
of its moment in time sort of thing.
Like the story sounds really interesting, right? But the delivery of it kind of falls flat for a modern audience.
Yeah.
In my, that's what I think. But I actually went after finishing one true ending, which, by the way, I died twice. And that's the other thing that I really enjoyed. If you die, or if you reach a bad end, you usually die, but whatever. You have this little skit where one of the characters tells you what you think wrong and hints you how to progress further down the road.
Oh, okay.
And that was pretty neat. So what happened with Tsukihime is given the circumstances under which it was released, I don't feel that it reached its full potential. Because there's potential there, and the story is, I don't want to say pretty good, but it's solid. And if you like what's the word, Fate Zero, Tsukihime is part of the same universe. And I think some stuff that happens in Tsukihime actually explains stuff from Fate Zero or Fate whatever.
It's the original Marvel Cinematic Universe right over here. Jesus.
Are you really a fan?
Because there was another game before that.
Of course there was.
I didn't dig up on that. But it seems that Tsukihime put Type Moon under the public lens. Yikes. And from them, from that point, Type Moon started releasing bigger and better games.
Cool.
Right.
From what I understand. So if you want to, if you think you can put aside the, what's the word, your
anachronicities.
Yeah, but very much if you're a person that is able to appreciate a game for the time it was released in, then by all means just make sure to skip the erotic scenes. Get the patch version. If you're not, there's another way to experience Tsukihime, and there's actually a manga. And I read the first few chapters of the manga, and so far it was pretty good.
Nice.
There's no anime. Okay, there's an anime, but the fandom says that it doesn't exist because it is bad. It is bad.
Read the manga.
So if you want to experience this weird game that was released under very weird circumstances, but it has a solid story and a solid lore, go for it. If not, and if you're curious about the lore, read the manga. If not, okay, you can skip it.
Also, what was the other big baddie you beat this week? Because I know you beat a big one, didn't you?
You beat an hour after we finished last week's recording, which was quite funny. Message ping through straight afterwards. I've done it!
I thought that it would take me a little bit more, but I didn't realize that what I needed was pretty much in a couple of battles that I could have accessed anytime. Because I am dumb. So, Hyrule Warriors, Age of Calamity, I finished it. Nice. I am happy. And I have my notes. So, even if it isn't a true prequel to Breath of the Wild, people who has seen what the game is actually like and have played the game will know that it isn't. It is more like a what if in a scenario. But I still enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed my time with it. It was fun. It was really fun watching the champions that you only get glimpses of in Breath of the Wild, interact with each other and stuff. There were a couple of scenes that were pretty funny because you are able to read the journals of the different characters in Breath of the Wild. And there was like a little entry that said that Link was like a glutton and that he ate this rock thingy that the girls eat. And you actually see him. I'm like, Link, why? Well, I guess he's a glutton. He eats anything.
Nice.
So the gameplay itself was fantastic. Like, especially if you compare it like to other Warriors games, every single character, in my opinion, had like a very different moveset, and it felt very different to play as. And you can go like with any serious character or any of the joke characters that are in the game. There's actually one joke character, and I love it. And that character is actually pretty strong. And so yeah, no two characters feel the same, and even like the same character with different weapon types feels different to play, which is nice. That note, my favorite characters to play as were Urbosa, because she is strong, she is very fast, and all the animations make her seem like super elegant, and Link because he's the ultimate powerhouse of the game. Shoutouts to other characters like Zelda, Rivali, Impa, and Mifa. Mifa, by the way, is the only healer of the game. And it's the first time I see a healer in a Musou game. At least from what I played. I might be wrong. The music is 11 out of 10. And the one, I don't want to say problem, but the one thing I kind of wanted to see a little more of is the hooded figure that you see on trailers, because you get to see him in action, but I feel like it had so much potential and I wanted to know more.
That'll be the DLC, I'm sure. Or maybe Breath of the Wild too. Think about it.
Maybe. That would be nice. Probably. Also, his voice actor knocked it out of the park. It was beautiful. By the way, I'm playing the game in English. And the returning voice actors were like more comfortable in their roles, or at least it seems that way, because like the voice acting on Night of Calamity is so much better than Breath of the Wild. And even better than the Champions Ballad DLC. So overall, fun gameplay and characters, a stellar soundtrack that goes perfectly with the action. The story is pretty divisive among the Zelda fandom. You don't want to go there. If you enjoy the game as it is, or if you don't go into the sandstorm that is the Zelda fandom regarding the story of the game. My opinion was good. I'm sorry. It's fine. True.
I don't touch fandoms at all. I just sit in my little corner.
You shouldn't.
But I respect anyone who loves that and wants to be a fan of things.
Please leave me alone. Don't give me any trouble.
Yeah.
When there's like divisive things like in a fandom, I tend to stay out of it.
I just grab my
because I'm usually part of. I'm usually the unpopular opinion type, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be here.
Nice. Awesome.
And yeah, and even if the story is divisive, there were like great moments, like fearful, happy, creepy, whatever, and it delivers well each of the tones of the game. And I swear it went to dark places at some point, and I was like, no.
It sounds like an interesting game that I'll never play.
Yeah, I'm so there.
I know. I feel bad because like I love Zelda, but Musou games, I don't know. I don't know what it is. But I'm really
there's only so many times you can hit the same button. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, I guess you can always like watch the scenes of you on YouTube if you're like ever like.
That's not a bad idea, actually.
That is actually a good idea. But I just wanted to play it because I enjoy Musou games, because you technically can't just like switch to everything, but there's like a level of strategy to do it faster and get like a better score. in the case of Breath of the Wild, it was just fun trying to min-max everything.
Yeah, no, I totally recognize that they're an enjoyable game for many people. It's just, for some reason, it doesn't hit for me.
Speaking of Breath of the Wild, if we use that to roll straight into what we're playing, because none of us have retired anything this week, Paula, tell us, what have you been playing this week?
Yeah, I've been cork hunting in Breath of the Wild.
Oof,
It's been a while right there. I actually got 388 corks so far. Yeah. And I got 108 hours so far in the game.
Yikes.
And we actually tried to speedrun the game like with my boyfriend on his birthday, and it went as well as you think.
Well,
the other game I'm playing is called Realize Shirogane no Kiseki. I'm 3 hours in. I'm 3 scenarios in. It is in Japanese, so it's gonna take a while.
Nice. I'm playing a game on Game Pass called Call of the Sea. I'll talk about that more next week because it's pretty short and I think it'll be beaten by then. Still playing Grindstone. Pretty far into it. It's getting so hard. Still playing Hades. Still playing Koudelka. That's all for me. What about you, Rick?
Yeah, my stuff's mostly the same as well. I've played some more Blasphemous. Thoughts haven't really changed on that. It's still fantastic. Ditto Cyberpunk. Ditto Drill Dozer. Ditto Rabbids Going Home. Ditto Reiki. The two newish ones, which I'll touch on. The first one is one I picked up in the sale, a game called Going Under. It's like a roguelike themed around sort of Silicon Valley startup sort of things. I've only really played the tutorial area, but it seems like a lot of fun so far. And then the other one is Call of Duty 17, Black Ops 5, Cold War, to give it its proper title, which I have a lot of friends that I play it with, so that's like my normie concession thing. Nice. We've been playing a lot of the gunfight mode, which is sort of rounds of 2v2 and 3v3. It's a lot of fun, but it's Call of Duty, you know if it's for you or not. It's very good. The spaz and the DMR are the way forward. But yeah, that's everything I've been playing. Nice. And speaking of things we've been playing, I'm playing this year as a whole. Let's roll straight on through into our topic this week, which being the last week and the last recording of 2020 and recording number 10. So that's a nice milestone for us. Round of applause.
That's why we ran through what we're playing, because we want enough time to talk about let's call these our How Long to Beat Podcast Awards.
Yeah, I mean, that feels a little bit too grandiose, but let's go with that.
It's far too grandiose.
Go on then, kick us off.
Let's start with our Game of the Year for 2020. And so this is the best game released in 2020. And so for me, I'm going to be honest with y'all. Didn't play a lot of games released in 2020 this year. I did play some, but there's a lot of the big games out there that I didn't play. For instance, I haven't beaten Hades yet. A lot of people are like, that's best. I like it, but I haven't beaten it, so I don't know if it's the best yet. Never played Ghost of Tsushima. There's a lot of games I haven't played, and I'm sure I love it. So my game of the year for me is The Last of Us Part 2. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, Last of Us Part 2, blah, 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 it's too long and shit. But I'm like, okay, it is a really goddamn good game. Like, regardless of like the divisiveness of it, it's just well made. And when I played it, there were times where I was like, yeah, this is a bit long, I want to get to the next part. But I never once was like, this game's not very well made. You know what I mean? Like, it was like all my nitpicks were more just like artistic or like personal sort of preference things. But in terms of like as a game, I was like, this is just so good. It just feels good. It just looks insane. Okay, I also have to say, the fact that this game is playing on a PS4 and on a base PS4 no less, and I never, ever had a single goddamn bug, not a texture glitch, nothing. This game was literal perfection on my PS4, and I'm on like the base model. I'm not even on the slim, you know, like I'm on just this base thing. And I would have like, you know, Final Fantasy VII Remake. I just had doors that never looked like doors. They just, the texture packs were just always not working. And so the fact that they did that to me just blows me away. So anyway, that's my game of the year. I don't know. Is it the best game this year? I don't know. But it's the best one that I played. Who wants to go next?
I'll go next because it's a nice roll in. My game of the year technically is 13 Sentinels, but we'll come to that later on. My game of the year for this specific category is actually Ghost of Tsushima, which is a culmination of everything that games have been doing for the past years in terms of open worlds. And it definitely doesn't particularly do anything new It doesn't really break a lot of ground. Maybe a little bit in terms of the setting and the story, you could argue that. But in terms of the actual gameplay and the mechanics and the game structure, it's nothing you've not seen before. But it's put together in such a beautiful way. So much care has gone into how it builds into the way it does sort of checkpointing, into how they sort of have little foxes and birds to like come across your path and take you away from it's what you talked about a few episodes about the hollow per minute thing.
Yeah.
Where the world just begs to be experienced and explored, and it's always a sign of good open world where you will happily forego the main storyline for hours just to see whatever sort of pops up your path along the way. There was never a moment where that world wasn't a joy to experience and to exist in. Helps that the combat's great. Helps that the story is incredible. It feels like I say this every time I talk about the game, but no game usually moves me to tears once, yet alone twice like this game did. This game made me feel shit. And I loved it. And anyone who has a PS4 or a PS5 should absolutely play this game. It is phenomenal. It's a beautiful capstone on the end of the PS4's life cycle as sort of the console of the generation, as it were.
I'm sort of laughing because I know myself. Like, if I had played this game this year, I'm sure I'd be like, we got the same one. Like, I already, I just know myself. I'm like, that sounds like a game made for me. But I'm just waiting until I eventually get a PS5. I don't know why. I'm just like, I'll get it when it's cheap and play it later.
Listen, that can be your best game you played in 2021 that wasn't released that year in 12 months' time. Go on, that's me. Paula, what was your game of the year 2020?
So, a little bit of context. Like, I completed 33 games this year.
Nice.
11 of which are visual novels. 2 of them are pictures, and 1 is coloring pixels. So, my pool of games to choose from is very, very small.
Yeah, but I think for all of these, the caveat has to be we can't say it if we haven't played it.
Yeah, so if anyone's like, this was the best game, and I'm like, yeah, well, that sounds great, son.
It might be,
it.
yeah.
Sorry, keep going, Paula.
What I chose as my game of the year of 2020, I took into consideration also the context of 2020. 2020 was hell. So for me, like, my happy place for months on end was Animal Crossing New Horizons. Because it's such like a cute, wholesome game that just lets you lose yourself in an isolated island, attacked with little cute animals that look like they're made out of felt, and it is adorable. And given that this year hasn't been like a good year for pretty much anyone, and we've been quarantined, I've been able to still like kind of visit my friends in their little island over the internet. So in an isolated world, and an isolated island, it has brought people together, in my opinion. So that's why I chose it as Game of the Year.
Nice.
You just, when you were talking about your completions, I just realized, I was like, I wonder how many I beat this year. Lord almighty, 81 freaking games. I'm like, I've played too many games this year.
I'm so there. I think I've crossed triple figures. I'll double check while we crack on. I'm pretty certain I've hit 100. In your defense, though, 10 of those were part of the 10 milligram collection. So 10 of them collectively took about 2 hours.
Yeah, you're right.
And then another.
Yeah, I've beaten so many short games this year too, because I did the Game Boy thing, which is like some of them are like 2-hour long games.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, let's go on to the next category then. So this is the best game you played in 2020, not necessarily released this year. So for me, this one is I had a really hard time with this because a lot of the games I played this year were good. Like I played very few bad games. I didn't really play a lot of incredible, like the greatest games ever kind of thing, right? But for me, the one that I picked is actually Hypnospace Outlaw.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
that's the 90s PC sort of internet one, isn't it?
Yeah, 90s, like early 2000s PC. It's like you're sort of like a PC detective, and like, to be honest, I used a guide for a lot of it because I was like, I don't know, because it can be a little obtuse. But it was just such a phenomenal simulation and like environmental storytelling piece where like you really get to learn about people. And what was so cool is that, sometimes in these games, you're asked to go learn about somebody through like logs and journals and stuff. And you sometimes feel like they're giving you information that would never actually be written down, like no one would really write this intricate of a thing. But in this game, it all actually makes sense because you're like, no, the stuff that's being written down is stuff that I've probably written on the internet, or like in that day and age, people did do this. Like it actually felt genuine. It was like, no, this genuinely feels like something I could discover on the internet. And, so I don't know. It's just so wonderful. And like, I do think it benefits if you've maybe lived through part of that era. Like, I'm sure it makes you feel a little more warm and fuzzy, but I also think it could be a really cool tool if you didn't, and like, you want to learn more about that time, right? And you're like, what was that like? I think it's a really neat exploration. So that's mine. What about you, Rick?
That's a great one. Mine, and it's one I think I talked about in the podcast about 7 or 8 episodes back, is A Short Hike, which I had to double check. It released in 2019, so we're good. And actually, while we're talking about completions, I checked while you were talking. I've completed 113 games this year, and it's not even finished yet. I know.
113. That's perfect. Yeah.
It's perfect for my hidden gem, which we'll come to, but we'll leave that for a second. A Short Hike is just a wonderful, fuzzy experience. You reminded me a lot, Paula, of what I felt playing it when you were talking about your experience with Animal Crossing. It's just a beautiful sort of little chunk of space to spend a couple of hours in. I played it like in 2 sittings. I couldn't put it down. I was playing it. In fact, I think that podcast episode I was late to, or almost late to, because I was playing A Short Hike. Yeah, I was going to say, I thought I remembered that, right?
Yeah.
It's wonderful. It's on PC and Switch. I don't really want to say anything more about it. The music's gorgeous. That's the last thing I'll say about it. If you have a way of playing it, you must play it. It's like 2 hours long. Just do yourself a favor and thank me afterwards. Paula, what was your non-2020 game of the year of 2020?
I've actually been thinking for a while. Like, for a moment, I was actually thinking about giving it to A Short Hike, but I still kind of rushed through the game. I didn't have, even if it is quite adorable, and the overall feeling of the game is like such a, like, it's a feel good kind of game.
100%.
I actually wanted to give a shout out to Layton's Mystery Journey, Catriel and the Millionaire's Conspiracy. That is an entry on the Professor Layton series. But you don't play as Herschel Layton. You play as allegedly her daughter, Catriel. And when I first picked up the game, I was a little bit apprehensive because, like, the second trilogy of the Layton games kind of went like places with their plots. So having Catriel like just start out the detective agency and her like looking for her father and just living each day solving mysteries and stuff was a little bit of a throwback to the other games. Not as emotionally powerful as the other games, because my all-time favorite Layton has to be the Gone Future or the Lost Future.
Absolutely.
I think it's Unwound Future here. It has a bunch of different names.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It was Lost Future. Yeah. Anyway, yes, yeah.
Well, even if that's my favorite Layton game, Catriel kind of went back to the roots of Layton, and that felt very good. It is a shame that the original Puzzle Master of the Layton series isn't here anymore, but whoever picked up the spot, I think they did like a wonderful job in the Catriel's puzzles. So that, like, it is a very good game, very great puzzles. The story is lighter, I think, but I really like how you get to interact with a lot of characters, but in different situations, because like time has been passing it as you solve different mysteries. And Catriel is just a lovable goofball. Like, she is great, and there's actually an anime based on this game. And I think it goes like a little bit further down the story. I don't know if it's canon, but it just made me love Catriel so much more because she's just great. She's fun to watch as she investigates and stuff.
Yeah, I've played the first two Layton games this year. It's nice to hear that they like kind of maybe returning to form a little bit, because I did hear the second trilogy was a little bit like okie dokie.
That's pretty much how I felt about the second trilogy, to be honest. You've got the best one to come. Lost Future is absolutely the highlight of the series. The first two are great. The third one's something else.
Cool.
Yeah, so long and short is I agree.
Nice.
It's a long way of saying
Paula.
the same thing. Yeah.
Why don't we move on to our next category? This is the most underrated game / hidden gem of 2020. So whichever one you decide to slot in there. I was stuck between two here, and this is my cheap way of making sure I can mention them. I was stuck between Astro Boy Omega Factor on the Game Boy Advance, which is a great game, but ultimately I chose one that was actually released this year, and that's Paradise Killer, which I talked about recently. Yeah, the detective game. This game is so unique and so effectively does the investigation portion of like a detective game in a way that I hadn't seen before. And it really unfolds at your pace, right? And there's no like, you don't have to go here. It's like you have to just go through and discover everything that you possibly can. And I think that open approach to it is really effective. And it's one of those games that I just don't hear anyone talking about now. And I'm like, get this game. It's great. You know, like if you like Phoenix Wright, you will love this game. Hell, if you just like kind of open world, like sort of polygonal-ish graphics, vapor, wave sort of style, you're going to love the shit out of this. It's kind of a nice partner piece to Hypnospace Outlaw, I'd say, actually. Like they have a vibe that's similar. So yeah, I can't recommend that game enough. And I really feel like, I don't think it's underrated. I think those who did rate it, like, loved it. But I do think it's a bit of a hidden gem because I just don't think a lot of people have been playing it, from what I can tell. So hop on that. Yeah. It's on the Switch.
One question I had, just based on some of the coverage I've seen of it, does it feel sort of padded at all in terms of the open world? Because it seems like people's biggest criticism is just that there's a load of extraneous guff in and around the mystery goodness sort of thing.
I maybe a bit. It's hard for me to sort of remember. I think my complaint was more just that, like, at a certain point you discover just about everything and then you're just like, crap, what's that last thing I need? That's more my issue. I don't think there's a lot of extraneous stuff. I don't know, though. You kind of have to experience it to sort of figure it out. It's not a perfect game. Like, I will say that. It's definitely not a perfect game. But it is different. And it is doing something new. And I think that is why I forgive it some of its foibles, Nice.
Yeah, well, it's on my Steam wish list. It was just a matter of curiosity. And I suppose in terms of picking it up, it'll just be a case of when the discount's good enough and I'm in a place where I want to play it. But that's the case with so many amazing games. This is the curse of the backlog. Right, my hidden gem of 2020, and it certainly isn't a hidden gem if you've been listening to any episode of this podcast. You already know what
Let's
it is.
Let's all say it together. 13 Sentinels.
13 Sentinels Aegis Rim for the PS4. A masterpiece of our time. I cannot overstate how incredible this game is. And it's a story that could only be told in this medium. Kamatani, the creative behind it, has done something incredible with the way he's managed to weave 13 stories in together, make them all cohesive, make them all work however order. What? High English, whatever order you play them in, whatever order you experience them in. And also at the same time as having this incredible narrative adventure experience, weave in a proto RTS combat system that is just a hell of a lot of fun to play. It's just amazing all round. One of the frustrating things trying to get people to understand just how good this game is that it's almost an anything is spoilers situation, where I just don't want to say anything about the story because the story needs to be experienced, and anything I tell you will diminish the experience you eventually have. It's incredible. We won't see anything like it for a long time to come. We certainly haven't seen anything else like it to date. If it's not the best game I've ever played, it's certainly in the top 2 or 3. Ironically enough, with a couple of other Vanillaware games, but that's by the by. If you have a PS4 or a PS5, you must play this game. And again, you can do it whenever and thank me afterwards, but you have to play it.
For some reason, I feel like Rick is talking specifically to me and covering the playing these.
That's
games.
all you, but you do need to get around to it.
Forever, I'm gonna do it. I have the game there. I have my PS4 there. I'm yet to find the cable, but I know it's over there.
So what's
Listen,
your...
exams, schmexams, just do it.
Yeah, just get her done. I'm glad that I've escaped the wrath. I'm just like, oh, I don't know a PS4. Blah, 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 blah. All right.
Listen. I'm picking my battles. You're next on the list, Alex.
Yeah, there you go. So, Paula, what's your hidden gem or underrated game?
For this one, I went with a little kind of puzzle game called Invento, like Bento as in bento box.
Oh, in Bento. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's got that cute little art style, right? Like the...
Yeah, that third one. It is an adorable puzzle game in which you start playing like this mama cat that is like making a little bento box for her little kitten. And it kind of gives sense or a meaning to the progression of the difficulty, because you start, like, the game first teaches you to put a little bit of food on the bento box, and then you have to put more food in the bento box, and you have this empty bento, a set list of not only ingredients but steps, and you have to reach like the picture of the bento you're given. You have to make the exact same bento, but in very limited steps. And it has to be that amount of steps. And
I'm looking at it now. Is it? Do you get sort of specific shapes that you have to slot in the right way to match the thing at the top? I'm not exactly right. Okay.
You get like blocks of food in a specific like combination of sorts. But you can also get these action blocks that, for example, will swap the lower corner with the upper corner ingredient.
Okay.
It is difficult to explain, but because it is I don't think I've ever played like any puzzle game that is like this.
Cool.
And it tells like a little heartwarming story to go with it. So if you like puzzle games, if you like cute stuff, or if you just want to have like, I don't know, you don't feel good, you want to have something wholesome to look at, play Invento.
Nice.
It is adorable.
And
I am, no exaggeration, buying it right now.
Nice.
Wait, it's on the phone. It's £2. No reason why not. Yeah, no pressure, but I'm going to be playing that soon.
Oh no! Oh no!
Yeah, this will be another like comes back next week. This is the worst.
Yeah, the gameplay stinks.
Speaking of gameplay that stinks, moving on to our next category.
I like that segue.
That was a good segue, am I right?
That was a great segue.
The most 2020 completion of 2020, aka
game that you completed.
Yeah.
You somehow completed and you think it is shit.
Yeah, exactly. So I have to admit, I didn't play any games this year that were shit. Like all the games I played were good, at least. There was one game I played though that was disappointing, and I think that's sort of, which really isn't that what this year was. Just
if you're being polite, then absolutely.
Exactly. So my game is Signs of the Sojourner. This is a card conversation game that released this year, and it had so much potential. Essentially, you're in this caravan, and you have to go out to get materials, and you're venturing to other places. And the way that you play the game is you have conversations with individuals, but you have conversation cards, and you have to match those cards to create successful conversations. The reality is that the further you go out, the more complex the conversations get, or there's lingo that's like specific to a place, and thus you're switching out your cards each time as you go. But you're bound to come to places where it's just not going to work. The reality is that the game is incredibly frustrating. Its systems do not actually function. It functions to an extent, but the reality is that if you want to explore something, and like I get what it's trying to sort of do, like it's trying to make a bit of a point about communication and how, like, you know, the more you go out, the harder it is to communicate with those who stay home. Sure, but like as a game, it's not working. Like I can't unlock a lot of the stories because you're forcing me to switch my cards every time. And so like some of the storylines that I want to follow, I just can't do it. So like, I don't know. You could probably like study it really deeply and try to like figure out exactly how to do it, but I just ended up being really frustrated because it felt like the game was like fighting me at every turn. It was like, here's a thing you can do, and then it was like, but no, you can't do it that way. Ha ha ha. And you're like, dude, what the hell? You're like introducing to me all these cool concepts, and you have such a good core concept. Why do you keep like fucking it up on me? So anyway, that's mine. What about you, Rick?
Mine, it was a bad game, but it's also sort of an excuse to talk about a really great collection. So I mentioned it briefly earlier. I played a collection of games under the banner of 10mg. So like 10 milligrams, but it stands for 10-minute games. And it was a really cool little pack on Steam of short, roughly 10-minute experimental game experiences. And a few of us played it on the Discord, had slightly different opinions on what we did or didn't like about them, but we all agreed that it was a great collection generally. The one real low point for me of the 10 games was a game called Slasher Interrupted, which pitches itself as a VN where you play someone telling a story at a campfire, but your friends keep interrupting your story and you have to try and adapt it to keep them happy. It was the one game in the collection that I felt suffered from being short. Because it didn't give itself any breathing room, and actually sort of similarly to how I felt with Florence, now that I think about it, just didn't really give you any way to invest in those characters, didn't let you feel anything. Ended up just being quite disappointing and frustrating to play in the end. So that was a shame, but the 10 milligram collection as a whole is fantastic. It's like £7, $10 your regional equivalent for 10 games.
Nice.
7 of which I'd say are fantastic, 9 of which are good to great, depending on your taste. And particularly there's one called 10 milligram Smiley Face, which is the first one in the collection, and it's just a really great high point on which to start. It's 10 minutes of pure ecstasy and joy and discovery. So I'd like to finish it on a positive note.
Good.
Have a look at the collection, maybe skip that one of the 10 and enjoy the other 9.
And what about you, Paula?
I don't think I played any games that were like bad. Well, there were like a couple of visual novels, but I retired them. But I was early in the year in a point and click rampage, and one of them was Scream Legends: The Forsaken Bride. I think the first one in the series of Scream Legends, it was rough. I remember. I think like generally like the games from that studio had sometimes this uncanny valley kind of art style. Especially like in the early games, but the Forsaken Bride kind of like put me off somehow because it was like it looks human, but it isn't. It looks somehow kind of human, but no. But what put me off the most was like being the first one in the series. Like a lot of stuff was experimental, I guess. So it shows. So glad that the other games in the series actually like build up like in the gameplay, because like in Green Legends I had to put like the thing that makes things glow if you don't see them on, because it was very, very difficult distinguishing anything you can click from the background. It is a point and click, so we can have that.
Yeah.
That made me.
It was good to have the option though. Oh, and I feel like this. I don't remember the story, and when I don't remember the story of the game, it's usually because I didn't care enough about the story. So
for the end, it doesn't bode well.
And it is the one point and click game that I played that is like I have no recollection of playing it. I think I went to the site and I think I put it like 7. I think it is more like a 6 because it is like above average or kind of meh. But the other games in the series are better. They do things better. They present the game more interestingly.
Okay.
It's just like this one, the one that drops the ball.
When you said retired, I just realized I never looked through my retired list, and I realize now if I were going to say what my worst game was, Divinity Original Sin 2. Fuck that game. Fuck that game so much. I hate that game. I hate that game. I hate it. I don't care what anyone says, but I hate that game. I'm sure it's good on the computer, but I hate that game. All right, let's move on. That's my hot take. So let's go to our final category, which is your guilty pleasure, or I played this way too much game of 2020. For me, it is everything with the title Picross. That is my guilty pleasure. Mario Super Picross, Murder by Numbers, Picross 4. Oh my god, I spent way too much time playing Picross. Except I will say Murders by Numbers. That's a good game. But Picross 4 and Super Mario or Mario Super Picross or whatever, I shouldn't have played it that much. Yeah. Mario no Super Picross. Yeah, that game. Too much. Anyway, that's me. I don't even want to know how many hours I put into Picross this year. It's too many hours. What about you?
Man, mine for the past 4 or 5 years would have been Rocket League. This year, and it actually fell at a really good time with furlough and the pandemic and everything else that's going on, was Call of Duty Warzone. So I got crazy into that. As it happened, the friends that I usually play Rocket League with, plus a couple of other friends besides, all got into it around the same time, and we all got into it hard. So I mean, there were weeks of the first sort of March through June lockdown where I would spend the majority of my waking time playing that game with various friends. And it was really nice, actually, because it was like generally as guys, we don't just talk about our feelings. We have to be doing something and then it just comes out naturally. And so it was a really nice sort of support network to have going as well, because we'd sort of play the game for a few hours and shoot the shit and just talk about what was going on with us and sort of communicate with each other and be present. And that was a really nice thing to have at that specific time. That was then, of course, the gameplay's persisted, and I've been playing Warzone sort of semi-regularly for about 9 months now, and it's slightly becoming a problem. But it is great, and it is free. And as I was saying with Cold War before, it's Call of Duty. Like, you're going to know if you like that kind of game or not. And if you happen to be a young listener and you've not really played any of them yet, it's free. So provided you have the storage space, which isn't a given anymore.
No.
Hot take. Anyway, but provided you have a big enough hard drive or SSD, there's no barrier to entry. Give it a try, see how you feel. It's a blast. But yeah, that's me.
Nice. Paula, you
what
want
about
to
you,
take
Paula?
us home? Yes, sir.
So, like, trying to decide on any kind of I played this way too much or guilty pleasure. I know that automa games in general for me are like a guilty pleasure because they are a little bit difficult to recommend to most gamers, because you pretty much play as a female character in this visual novel, and romance is kind of the point of the game, even though some games have like great stories that carry you to the plot and kind of makes the game more recommendable to other other people that aren't like into automas in the first place. So my thought process was like, okay, let's change the question. Which otome
That's not
game?
allowed. No, sorry, go on.
Oh no.
I'll leave it out.
Like, to find like the ultimate guilty pleasure of the year. Which otome game I wouldn't want to get caught playing in public?
That's good.
Yep.
Like,
That's good.
I'll let you off.
because I'm more open like about otome games, but there's a couple of them that are more, I don't want to say spicy, but you know. So I had two options. But the first one was Color X Unlimited, but it is a fantasy, so it is expectable to be more in the spicy side. And the other one is Pio Fiore. And I stick with Pio Fiore because it's like the base game. The story is amazing, in my opinion. I played a lot of visuals. But there are a couple of routes where if you're like in a public space, you may not want to be playing because of a couple of CGs. CGs is computer graphics short, but for like the what's the name? For the image you get. So
Dirty pictures.
I think that
The
of
dirty
all of the otome games I played this year, Pio Fiore is like my guilty pleasure.
Nice.
Nice.
Thank you for sharing that.
Jinx.
Well,
Oh,
I'm so sad
no.
now. What was I going to say? Oh, right. So, well there you go, everyone. That's our first How Long to Beat Podcast Awards. Some great games.
Hopefully we do another one.
Yeah, well, hopefully we make it to another year. We can have a second
first
annual.
of many.
Yeah, let's see. Fingers crossed. I mean, we made it to 10. That's pretty great. So what we'll do to end off today, we have a quick question from Let's Talk About Dune on the podcast forum, who also makes all the intro and outro music that you hear. I don't know if you've ever actually said it on the podcast under his artist name, Ian Edward. They ask, what's the story behind your username? I'll jump off because mine's real quick. My username is Alex5101, which sounds so original. And believe it or not, that actually is a shortening of another username, which was Alex51011. It's very shortened. And that comes from Neopets way in the day. So when I was,
my lord.
Yeah, when I was a young kid, I made a Neopets account and I wanted to be Alex, but couldn't be Alex. And one of the drop downs was Alex51011. And it just stuck. Like it just stuck, you know? I used it again and then I used it for another thing and then I just used it for an email address and then eventually I just dropped one of the ones.
It became a thing, yeah.
And it just became a thing, and then now I just had it, and I was like, well, whatever. I guess I could just keep it because you know it's fine. It's like it connects me to my other like accounts. I have one other one that's Zoo Funky Face, and that's my Xbox one, and that's actually because in high school I had buds, and they all had Zoo and Face in their names, and they would pick something random in the middle. So all of us have a Zoo something Face name, and I kind of just love that one, and so I still just have that for gaming, and it's just sort of fun. Anyway, that's my username. Neopets.
That's nice. I've sort of got three, so you go first, Paula.
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
So, actually, this is a question that got thrown to me when I was guest with the other podcast crew. And my username is Pokepal, like Poke from. Many people think
like
it's from
the
Pokemon.
Delicious Thai dish. Oh, is it from Pokeballs? Okay, sorry, keep going.
I mean, there's people that think that it's like Poke, like in Pokemon, but it has the same root because at some point I wanted to make a YouTube channel with like, but I couldn't decide on what kind of content I wanted to make. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do like little 10-minute, 5-minute, at most 15-minute things. So I was like, okay, Poke. It is a little experience, pocket size.
Yeah.
And the other part was Po, like PAW, particularly because for some reason it is kind of like a play on my name because Paula. But most English-speaking people that I had a chance to talk to up until that point pronounce it more like Paula.
Paula, right? They say it like the English Paula. Yeah, gotcha.
Right,
Yeah.
so it's truncated and then, yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, and also because like
Shit,
I like
think I've
cats,
been
so my
doing that.
logo.
Sorry, Paula.
It's okay. So like, and also I like cats, and for some reason when I think of cats, I think of paw prints too. So like the logo was like this ball thing, but with like a Pokeball like as the center of the ball. And that used to be like my YouTube nickname, but then I started using it everywhere.
Nice.
My YouTube it is still there, but the videos have been either privated or deleted
Before anyone gets too excited.
I have an image to take care of.
No, I hear you. Back in the day when it's like, we can all make YouTube accounts. And you're like,
Yeah, and then
No.
suddenly you don't want those things to be visible anymore.
Why don't you finish us off there, Rick? What about you?
So on the forums, I am Ninja Rick, which is mainly because when I was 12, I thought ninjas were cool. And like both of you, once the name becomes a name, then you start using it in a few places. You're sort of stuck with it a little bit. So that's where that was. And then very briefly on the Discord, I was called Brother Hammer, which came from a list of translations of the Chinese names of Marvel's Avengers characters. And that was the way that their name of Thor translated back into English. And I sort of loved that, and I took that on for a little bit. And then at the moment on the Discord, I am Big Rick Energy, which is a play on words of the common sort of slang term Big Dick Energy, which means someone that's so confident they must have a giant penis. and of course, the Rick flows beautifully into that. So that's where that came from, and that's where we are.
Nice.
So those
There
are my
was a
three.
second username that I use in very few places, more like in artsy places, or that dark hole called DeviantArt. And my other nickname is Elizabeth Little, and that is a play on my own name because Paula kind of means small, so little. And my second name is Isabella, that is Italian for Elizabeth. So I flipped them around, and then you have Elizabeth Little.
Little.
Oh,
Interesting.
Cool. That's cute. I like that. Nice.
Nice. Should we round this all off then?
Yeah. Thanks for that question. Let's talk about Dune. Now you all know a little bit more about our 12-year-old minds. And let's go into, or I guess we may do this a little later. Let's go into everyone's favorite game, How Long to Beat.
How long to beat the game?
Game.
Nice.
Fix it in post,
we
it's
were
fine.
terrible. Yeah. Which will never happen.
Always
I like how you say that
No,
every week.
no. It's just a running joke now. We'll fix it in post, but we actually won't.
All right, here we go.
Deal with it.
The random game of the week is Dead or Alive 2. Speaking of sexy games.
Oh my god.
Dead or Alive
Amazing.
2. I
Oh.
genuinely have no idea.
No,
at all.
me neither. I'm
Okay.
gonna go back to the classic strategy, which is hope all three are sort of short and gamble on 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours for main plus and 100%. So that's what I'm gonna do.
I don't feel confident on the completionist of this because I just don't feel confident on that. So I'm genuinely just going to do, I think I'm going to do 7 and 8. Yeah, I'm going to do 7 for main, 8 for main plus. Because that gives us, because I think so for the listeners, we changed the rules a little bit so that you have a 3-hour grace period if you choose 2 of them.
Yeah, two is 3 hour either way instead of 2 hours either way.
Mhm.
Yeah. What do you think, Paula? What do you got?
Trying to think. I actually investigated a bit, and the game is from 1999 or 2000. I'm trying to guesstimate here because I feel like if there's a main campaign, or if there's like something that's just main, it's like passing whatever campaign with one character. So I'm trying to think, and I think that it is. Oh, but it was also an arcade game. So I think it is like about 2 hours for just main, and main plus is more, given that there's a more or less big amount of characters, I think that for main plus is 7 or 8. I'm going to stick with 7, the lower end, because it is a really, really old game.
You know what?
So
to be
check
comfy, I'm going to do 5 for main. Just to steal Paula's idea. I'll do 5 for main, but I'll stick with 8 for
Interesting.
plus. Yeah. I
Did
don't
you
think
say
I'm gonna-
5 hours for main, Paula, not 2? Sorry.
Um,
Oh, no,
I'm
she's
gonna
saying
say-
two.
I'm going to say 3 for main,
Okay.
and 7 for main plus.
All
All
right.
I am
Check you're happy with those times as they're written, and
I
then we'll
am scared.
Let's do
wind
it.
it out, or at least happy enough for us to move ahead anyway.
Here we go.
Here we go. We suck, don't we?
Holy crap. Okay, I think Paula, you might be the only one who did this. So main story is 46 minutes.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Yeah. Main plus extras is 4.5 hours. Completionist is 17 hours. I think, Paula, you did it because you had 7, right?
Which... 4.5. Yeah, new rule. She's just squeezed in on both of them.
Oh, does she? Because that's 4 is...
Yeah,
it's 3 hours. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, 4.5. 4.5 to 7, yeah. So Paula's she's gaining on us. She's got 3 more points.
Actually, I like that. That's excellent because that means the standings now are 15 Alex, 15 Rick, and 9 Paula. So she's climbing on up.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for listening to this final episode of How Long to Beat Podcast for 2020. We'll be back same time on Thursday next week. Next year.
Same time next year.
That's it. Toodles.
All the best.